Welcome to the Apple for the Teacher podcast, the true crime podcast that features the good apples and the bad apples within the school system. My name is Anna Thomas, a teacher and your host. So join me as I present school stories that are tragic, shocking, unbelievable, and outright bizarre. Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today for episode 14. I'd like to start with sharing a few iTunes reviews with you. This first one was written by a person called Hotsy Shotsy. Now, I'm not sure whether you're a male or a female. I'm thinking that you might be a male, Hotsy Shotsy, who says, "Thank you for concentrating on the innocent. Never mentioning the guilty party's name sets you apart from other podcasts I have listened to. That's a good thing. I agree. Anna, you have a good voice." Thank you so much. That is just so lovely to hear that. And here's another review, a 5-star review from Alpha 106. "Great podcast. This is the best podcast I have ever come across." What? Are you for real? Each episode is packed with 2 engaging and well-selected stories. I recommend this podcast to all my friends. Thank you and keep up the great work. You know, I am truly blown away by these reviews, and I really mean that. I'm not sharing them to toot my own horn, but when I started this podcast, I had no expectations. It was just a hobby. I just loved listening to podcasts and wanted to do one of my own. I didn't think that it would last very long. At the start, I didn't have very many plays and I thought people must have thought it was awful. But then some other podcasters were kind enough to play my promo clip and then things really took off. So the podcast recommendations that you will hear are those podcasters who have been kind enough to support my little one-woman show. I don't have a huge team behind me. In fact, I don't have a team behind me at all. It's just me. But I have found the podcast world to be so amazing. The big guys supporting us little guys. So please give the podcasts a listen. And if you are a new podcaster and your pod seems to be only slowly plodding along, just be patient. It does take time for your name to get out there. There are so many podcasts and new ones coming out every single day, so don't give up hope. If you have a few spare minutes to write a review, I would really love that. I've been trying to promote my podcast wherever I can, but some podcast promotion sites won't look at you unless you have a certain number of iTunes reviews. So thank you so much if you could do that. Okay, so as I did in the last episode, I would like to continue to focus on a different country each week. And I can see on my podcast stats that we have listeners from Nigeria. So hello to all of you. Here are some interesting facts about Nigeria. The Nigerian movie industry is called Nollywood, and it's even bigger than Hollywood. It is estimated to be second in the world only to Bollywood in India. And another fact, once a woman is married, she may no longer see any of her male relatives again. Imagine that. And the left hand is considered dirty by Nigerians, and it is in poor taste to eat, shake hands, or pass or receive items with the left hand. And finally, Nigeria is home to the happiest and most optimistic people in the world. Well, I never knew that. So welcome to all of you happy and optimistic people from Nigeria. Let's now preview the stories today. The bad apple is called Great Balls of Fire. The crime was solved after 23 years. How? The good apple is called Mind Games. Reilly was online gaming. Then something unexpected happened. All right, let's get started. This first story is both a bad apple, but then turns into a good apple. We go back 23 years ago to 1996 to a school in South Carolina in the US called the Macedonia High School. It was 2 weeks before the new school year was to begin. The school had been closed permanently as it was due to be consolidated with the new Timberland High School. It was a Sunday, and a fire broke out at 3:30 in the morning at the school. It had been built in 1939 with a wood frame and hardwood floors, and therefore burned quickly. It took 100 firefighters and 26 departments to bring the fire under control. The investigators discovered a broken back window and trophy cases that had been overturned, so arson was immediately suspected. It appeared the school had been vandalised first, and then books and papers were used to start the fire. As the school was in a rural area, it burned undetected until the authorities were notified, but was not able to be saved. The community was devastated. They already had to deal with their historic school having to be closed, and now they were dealt another cruel blow with the school's destruction. While it was a clear case of arson, those responsible were never found. Now we fast forward some 20 years, and the case was reopened. Back in 1996, DNA was still in its infancy, and due to newly processed DNA evidence, the investigation uncovered a set of fingerprints found on a fire extinguisher. The investigators were able to find the person matching the fingerprints. He turned out to be a former student at the school and is now 40 years of age. He was arrested only a matter of weeks ago and charged with burglary and arson. Investigators also stated that there may be 2 other suspects involved in the crime. The man had previously been arrested on other matters back in 2006, and therefore his fingerprints had been on file. The arrest was announced in a press conference in September this year. Sheriff Dwayne Lewis stated, quote, "I hope the community feels some relief. The people who have put their heart and soul and energy into that school, their lives, their livelihood, their grandchildren, great-grandchildren, I just hope in some small measure that today gives you some comfort." The current superintendent of Berkeley County Schools, Eddie Ingram, said, quote, "Schools are not just brick and mortar. They are the heart and soul of every person that ever walked through the doors. I can only pray that the guilty parties will fully understand that they did more than just burn down the building. They burned a hole that in some ways can never be filled." End quote. The perpetrator was 17 years old at the time, but has been charged as an adult. In South Carolina, charges can be laid no matter how much time has passed, as there is no statute of limitations. During the news conference, the sheriff asked for the public's help for any information involving the case and, in particular, urged anyone who knew the man or his group of acquaintances at the time to contact the police. The principal at the time of the fire was Janie Langley, and she became very emotional when hearing the news of the arrest. She made this statement at the news conference: "I can't promise that I'm not going to cry, because I am. That school was the heart of our wonderful community. People came together for their children to be educated and educated well. It was an amazing high school. The love that the community put into it, and then for our school to be burned, it broke our hearts. I never thought I would live long enough, but in my heart, I knew that this case was going to be solved, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it." End quote. The following is a quote from Phoebe Bradbury, who was a student at the school and went on to be a teacher there as well. "We were a big family, and when it burnt down, we were mourning as if it was the death of a close family friend. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I only live about 1.5 miles from the school, and somebody called and said, 'You need to get to the school.' I jumped in the car, and before I even got there, we saw the smoke coming out, and we were in shock." Another student at the time, Sally Wofford, was in the last graduating class at the school before the fire. She said, quote, "The magnificent hardwood floors, the vaulted ceilings. When I close my eyes and think about the school, I think about those floors and those ceilings and all the times that were had there. I pray this brings closure to a lot of people and to a community I represent that made me who I am." Now, I'd like to finish the story on a positive note. While the entire school had burned down, there was one item that managed to be salvaged from the ruins: the original school bell. It is now displayed at the school district headquarters. And when the new school year started in August this year, it was rung by a teacher from the old school. He was the sports coach at the time, and his name was Fulton Mitchum. When they announced the ringing of the bell and showed the video on Facebook, so many old students started recalling their school days and how he was their favourite teacher. What is remarkable about this is that the bell had never been rung since the fire. And what a huge coincidence that the perpetrator was only found weeks later. They now plan to ring the bell at the start and end of every school year, but this decision had been made before the arrest. I just find this so incredible. I absolutely love this. And what could be more precious to a school destroyed after a fire than its old bell? I've seen the video and the picture of the bell, which I will put on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter for you to see yourself. It's one of those old-style bells someone would have to ring manually. I have now taken a snippet of the video so you can actually hear the sound of the bell yourself. So have a listen. I just love that. I would love my school to have one of these. The modern electric bells just don't have the same appeal. I think it's maybe showing my age, as I still have an old-fashioned phone ringtone on my mobile. I much prefer this rather than the music tones that you can get these days. There is also a tribute video to the old school, which I will put on social media as well. Now, as the arrest only came a matter of weeks ago, I am expecting more to come to light in this case. And hopefully some kids from back then are now mature enough to come forward with information. They may not have been involved, but could know who was. I just love how DNA and modern technology has been able to solve cold cases. The man arrested, no doubt, thought he got away with it. So, to all those criminals out there, watch your backs. They're coming for you. So stay tuned, everyone, on this story. Let's now have a break with 2 podcast recommendations. The first is called The Murder in My Family. And what I like about this podcast is that it focuses on the victims and their families and has interviews with family members. And the other podcast is called Writing About Crime with the lovely host Bonnie Lee. So here are the clips.
Hi, this is Mike Morford. You may know me as co-host of the true crime podcast Criminology. I'd like to invite you to listen to one of my other podcasts called The Murder in My Family. In each episode of The Murder in My Family, I discuss a murder case and include an interview with a family member of the victim to discuss the aftermath of the murder in an attempt to view these crimes from a unique perspective, one that we don't usually experience. Some of the cases I cover are well known, while others you probably never heard of. I currently have dozens of episodes available for you to binge on, including episodes about the Golden State Killer, the Delphi murders, and the Colonial Parkway murders, just to name a few. Here's a small sample of the kind of conversations you'll hear on The Murder in My Family.
Mike, at the risk of sounding like every other proud big brother around the world, Kathy was an amazing person. She was 27 years old at the time of her death, and she'd already accomplished a great deal.
One point that I wanted to get across was that the victims whose murders I discuss aren't just statistics or a blurb in a news report. These were real people whose murders affected their family members, forever changing their lives. It's important to know that they too are victims.
For me, knowing that he has a family and that he gets to see his kids every day and that he gets to be there for his kids growing up, like, it's not fair. You know, my dad did everything he was supposed to do as a father and as a husband, and someone decided that night that he didn't get to do that anymore. It's frustrating knowing that, you know, he'll get to see his kids grow up and graduate and get married and do all that, and my dad doesn't get to do any of those things. He doesn't get to see he has 3 granddaughters now that he'll never see, and they'll never meet their grandfather, and it's not fair.
New episodes of The Murder in My Family come out every other Saturday, and you can find The Murder in My Family everywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe today so you don't miss an episode.
I'm Bonnie Lee, the host of Writing About Crime, a Canadian true crime podcast that looks for the story behind criminal cases. The people, the places, and the events that join together to create a narrative, not a scoop. I am not reading you the news. I am writing about crime. I hope you'll join me on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
So let's now go on to the Good Apple story. I found this next story after one of the Facebook group members sent me a link to a news site. So thank you to Sherry Kuntz Tracy. This story deals with online gaming, which has become one of the fastest growing trends in recent times. The positives which are cited for children are that gaming improves coordination, memory, problem solving, concentration, and multitasking skills, while also providing fun and social interaction. The negatives are that children can become addicted and socially isolated. They can also be exposed to violence, sexual content, including pornography embedded in games, cyberbullying, identity theft, and the dangers of online predators. While much has been said about the dangers and the negative aspects of gaming, this story shows the positive side to gaming. Reilly Howard was a 14-year-old boy from a high school in Connecticut in the US. He enjoyed playing online games with his friends and also interacted with people that he didn't know, which is a feature of many online games. While playing the games, players can text one another and even talk in real time via headsets. Reilly said this about online gaming. You can find people online. You can get into a call. You meet, talk to them, you can message them at any time. It was while playing a game that Reilly met a 13-year-old boy from Florida. They soon became friends and played games online together. They could talk with one another, and although they never actually met, they enjoyed many mutual interests and enjoyed each other's company. But little did Reilly know what was about to happen one night. His friend didn't seem himself. He seemed down and got more upset as the conversation continued. He began crying and confided in Reilly that he wanted to kill himself. Reilly said, quote, "The 13-year-old messaged me saying he wanted to talk and cried his heart out while revealing that he had thought of taking his own life last night. He was choking a lot on the call and typed out that this might be his last night as he was going to go ahead with it." End quote. Reilly said that he knew he didn't want to be alone. He didn't want to leave him by himself. He was a friend, and so Reilly did everything that he could to prevent a tragedy occurring. Reilly wasn't sure what to do. His parents weren't home, so he phoned the boy and talked with him for a few hours. He listened and gave advice, trying to get the boy to see the positive side of things. Eventually, he convinced the boy to call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. He was put on hold for 17 minutes. During this time, his parents came home and called the police. Thanks to Reilly and his parents, the boy is now okay and is receiving the help he needs. Reflecting on what happened, Reilly had this to say, quote, "You know, I'm just a teenager. Who's going to listen to me? But people will, and you can have impact. You just have to show up and talk to people and listen. And I think that message needs to get out there." End quote. Reilly was honoured by the East Hampton Board of Education, where he lives, for his heroic actions. I have a photo of him receiving his award, which we put on Facebook and Instagram. How proud his parents must be. We know that often teenagers get a bad rap, but for the most part, they're great kids, like Reilly, who are capable of stepping up to the plate when really needed. What surprised me was that he was put on hold for 17 minutes. And that's not a criticism. It's probably a sign of underfunding and a very high demand for the service. While I was researching this episode, I found another story about suicide, but it's a good apple. So I thought I would share this one with you too. This next story takes us to China. A schoolgirl stood on the edge of a 17-story building rooftop threatening to jump. According to reports, she was severely depressed. The girl's family, her school principal, and classmates arrived at the site about 1 hour later and tried their best to dissuade her from jumping. However, their pleas were ignored. Then firefighters arrived at the scene. They talked to the girl for some time until she suddenly became very upset. She asked everyone to leave. Fearing for her safety, the firefighters moved back, leaving only her friends and family at her side. All tried to negotiate with her, but the girl seemed beyond the point of no return. They tried their best to keep her engaged. All this time, the firefighters were ready for a rescue. Her school principal was there and talked with her, trying to put her into good spirits. He then offered to give her a bottle of water. And as she was distracted, he reached out and grabbed her school uniform, pulling her back to safety. There are photos and a video that you can watch of what happened. In the photo, you can see the firefighters hiding themselves behind poles. The video is so incredible because she was so close to the edge, and you can really see from the picture how high she was on the top of that building. The principal grabbing her was so chilling. I really thought that she was going to fall to her death. It's amazing that she was able to be saved. So have a look yourself. So that's the end of the stories today. I decided to make this episode a little bit lighter after the family tragedy in the last episode. But next week, I have another absolutely unbelievable story that has just about everything that a true crime story has, all in one. Now, I'd like to tell you about an episode that I'm planning to do in the future. People have been asking me questions about the podcast, so I'm going to do a special Q&A question and answer episode. So you can get in touch with me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter and let me know your question. You can also send me a voice message. Just use whichever app that you listen to or wherever else the podcast can be found on the web. Click on any episode, and in the episode description, there is a link that says send voice message. The great thing about this is that I can directly put your voice message into an episode. So you can introduce yourself and ask your question, which all the listeners will be able to hear. So I look forward to receiving your questions, so don't be shy now. And finally, we now have some more Facebook group members. So hello to Jennifer Kangas, Amber Adams, Jessica Judge Lefarth, Christine Collier, and John Lester. And also I'd like to tell you about another new member who is from Poland. You might remember last episode I gave some facts about Poland. And then a lady from Poland joined the group after hearing me talk about her country. How about that? I asked her if it was true that one single man does the dubbing for all foreign movies and TV shows, even for women and children, and she said yes. I'm glad I had the correct information, as you never know what you read on the internet, whether it's true or not. Now, I'm going to try to pronounce her name, and it's a very tricky one, and I've been practicing for a few days. I know she will probably have a huge giggle, as will all the other listeners from Poland, but I'm going to try to do my best. So, here goes. Okay, let me get my mouth into gear. Her name is Ania Szkopinska. Ania Szkopinska. How was that? Try saying that when you've had a few too many alcoholic beverages. Ania Szkopinska. Now, there's a Z and a Y in there, and I'm not quite sure how to get the Z and the Y in my pronunciation. It's quite a tongue twister. But Anya, I can hear you laughing. I'm here in Australia, and I can hear you laughing in Poland. But I gave it my best shot. Ania Szkopinska. So welcome to all the Facebook group members. And as I spoke about Nigeria this time, I'm looking forward to someone from Nigeria joining the Facebook group, and I can talk about them next week. So now I'd like to finish with a preview of episode 15. It's called The Big Bang. Here's a summary. There was a sign on the fence that read, "Criminals are made, not born." Who wrote it and why? There is only one bad apple story next time, as it's quite a long story, so I'm not going to do any good apple stories next episode. So to end this episode, I will leave you with this quote. If we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. Bye for now, and remember to be a good apple.